The Texas justice system is messy, so let's break it down. You're listening to So You Got Arrested, the podcast that tells you what really happens after an arrest. Hosted by BRCK Criminal Defense Attorneys, we talk to the people who've lived it, worked in it, and been shaped by it. Whether you're facing charges or just want to understand your rights, your options, and the smart moves that could change everything, we've got your back.
So Scott, it's 1994. And a young Steve Barrera is going through a rite of passage that so many here in Texas go through as teenagers. Cruising down South Padre on the beach, Green Day's playing in the background, maybe Offspring, who knows, it's the 90s. And next thing I know, there's about 3 or 4 police squad cars that pop up behind the vehicle that I'm in. They have lights blaring. I have no idea what's going on. And the officers get out, they have guns drawn, they surround the vehicle, and I'm sitting in the back seat. And an officer approaches me with a gun drawn, and he's yelling at me, "Get out of the car." And my foot is wedged under the back seat. I can't get out. I'm scared. I know you wouldn't be able to tell this just by looking at my tough guy exterior, but I was in a complete panic. I had no idea what was going on, what was happening. Fortunately, it turned out it was a misunderstanding. And after we were put in cuffs and they asked some questions, we were released. But in that moment where I thought, hey, I'm being arrested, that was one of the scariest things I've ever been through in my life. So that's what we're here doing today on this podcast. So You Got Arrested. This is your guide from cuffs to courtroom. We're primarily focused on these areas that we know and love, the 210, San Antonio, this area and all the areas that surround us. My name's Steve Barrera. And Scott, if you would introduce yourself.
I'm Scott Simpson. I've been a prosecutor here in Bexar County for about 19 years and in Medina County for 2 years, along with being a defense attorney for 6 years or so.
Okay. Yeah. And there's a little bit of a contrast there because I've been a defense attorney for my entire 20 years. And I actually started practice in the small community of Wilson County, Texas. That's where I was raised. So I have a little bit of a different perspective from your big city practice that you bring to the table.
But Steven's too modest because he comes from a family of esteemed defense attorneys all throughout San Antonio. So.
I am the kind of the lesser known, the black sheep of the family, I guess you would call it. So in that situation, Scott, I was being arrested and I was in a complete panic. And I know that typically when somebody's being arrested, our advice to them is to stay calm. Why is that? Why?
Well, because so one of the things we say throughout any phase of your life is don't be an ass, right? And so because police don't respond well if you give them attitude in situations like that. And so I'm the more aggressive one. You're the more calm of the two of us.
Sure.
And I think that even though you said you were in a panic, you always exude a feeling of calmness about you. So I'm sure that you didn't give the police officers anything to escalate that already tense situation. Is that fair to say?
No, that's fair. If anything, they probably saw me about to burst out into tears in front of them. But the other thing, back then in 1994, I don't know that we had the body cams.
Correct.
That we have now. And so now with body cams, these officers are recording everything,
right?
Everything that's happening. In your time as a prosecutor, did it ever make a difference to you the way that somebody handled themselves during the arrest?
It always makes a difference to prosecution and police. So one of the things the prosecutor always looks at, say a garden variety DWI. One of the things the prosecutor looks like when they're trying to decide whether to offer you deferred adjudication or obstruction is was the guy being an ass to the police or not? Because I've had prosecutor upon prosecutor saying he was cooperative with the police, he wasn't a bad guy, so let's give him a fair deal. Okay. Now, if you sit there and the officer pulls you over and you start calling them names and saying, don't you have better things to do and things like that, that carries its way over into the courthouse. It just does.
Right. And along that line of giving the officer a hard time, sometimes if you take that to an extreme, it could result in additional charges.
Yes. Right? Yes. Yeah, but because there's people, obviously when you're drunk getting a ride down to the station, there's people who have made threats and saying, when I get out, I'm going to find you and things like that. And that becomes, you're turning what's a Class B misdemeanor DWI into a second-degree retaliation charge on the police officer.
So you're taking something that, maybe a minor offense that maybe at worst results in some probation, and you're turning it into a situation where time in prison is definitely a possibility. Right.
Correct.
Yeah. So staying calm is definitely, a key bit of advice anytime that you're in the process of being arrested. What about giving statements or talking?
Well, just understand that everything you say can and will be used against you. Now, we're not going to get into the nuances of what they have to do on the body cam in order for that to be admissible right now. We have 50 weeks of these episodes to do, and we'll delve into this along the process. But you have to assume that everything you say is going to be used against you. But that means it can be used for you too. In other words, so if you're pleasant and you're presenting yourself in a calm way to the officer, that has a lot of value. One of the DWI cases I tried a couple months ago, the officer was saying that my guy was swaying, which is why they obtained a blood warrant, and he didn't look like he was swaying on the body cam.
Right.
And that made a difference to the jury.
Sure.
Down the line.
Yeah. So those body cams, they can definitely at times be a good thing if you're being arrested, a good thing for your case, but they can also be a very bad thing. If, for example, let's say it's a DWI, and on that body cam, you're talking about the 10 shots of Patron that you've had that night, right? I mean,
or you get out of the car and you peed your pants. That's never a good thing.
Right. That's exactly what happens. So, you were talking a little bit about the fact that things that you say can be used in court. So that's one thing that I always like to remind people is we see these things in movies where when people are being arrested, they're saying, the things you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. That's a real thing. A lot of people don't understand that.
Yeah, everything can come back and bite you. And so understand that you don't have to answer the questions of the police. And so this you may disagree with the point I'm going to make here. I know a lot of defense attorneys in town say, don't blow, don't blow, don't blow. But if you're in San Antonio, that means you're going to get a blood warrant.
Okay.
And I think a lot of us would rather fight a case where it's a blow versus a blood warrant.
Right. Right.
So just do what you think is right. If you really, we've had people. I had a person this week in court whose BAC blood alcohol concentration level came back below the legal limit. So that case is going to be dismissed.
Okay.
So those things can happen too.
And it is a little different because most of my practice was in these rural jurisdictions like Wilson County, Atascosa County, Kendall County, Karnes County. And over there, they didn't always have someone who could obtain that blood warrant.
Right. So Medina County doesn't do blood warrants at all. So it's going to be based on whatever evidence you provide. So in those counties, it's the advice don't blow is good advice because they can't make you blow.
Right.
They can't make you do any of those field sobriety tests.
Right.
But understand that the prosecutor, if we end up going to trial, is going to say, if he really felt like he was sober, why wouldn't he do the test? Now, we may argue about whether that's admissible or not, but that's something for another topic.
And that's something you let your attorney worry about.
Yes.
So even after the part where you're being arrested and the officer has that body cam, there's cameras in the vehicle, right?
Yeah. So you got there's two cameras in the vehicle. One's facing the road and the other's facing you in the back seat.
Okay. So let's talk about the one facing in the back seat. Does that ever come into play?
It comes into play. So pretty much nobody knows that there's a camera on them when they're in the back seat. And so clients have been saying stuff like, "Oh, I'm really in trouble. I wish I hadn't have shot that guy," or things like that. and that's completely admissible because you're not statements you make to police in response to questions. We can argue about whether that's admissible or not. But when you're just rattling on and not in response to questioning, that stuff's coming in.
Right.
So when you're in the back seat making admissions or crying like I shouldn't have had all that alcohol before I got in the car,
right,
all that stuff's coming in.
Yeah. So I think the adage of keep your mouth shut,
it's always a good one.
That might be the right way to do it, right?
There was a comedian, Ron White, who said that he knew he had the right not to say anything. He didn't have the ability.
Right.
So yes, have the ability to not speak when it's not in your best interest.
So in that situation, you're being taken into custody. The officer now has you in cuffs. He has you in the back seat. He's driving you down. Where do they take you?
Well, so we deal with a lot of different jurisdictions because we also handle cases in the Hill Country, your old stomping grounds, the
Sure.
81st. Here in Bexar County, they're going to take you down to the criminal magistrate's office, and you're going to be waiting for a couple hours to be magistrated and read your rights. And then, I don't know that we're going to get to talking about bonds in this episode, but then your bond will be set by the magistrate, and then you're going to have to wait for a while before you process out.
Yeah. So in these smaller counties, you go to the jail. So you go to the local sheriff's department, and that's where they're taking you. And so when you get to that local sheriff's department, that's where you get booked. Okay. And a lot of people don't understand what's involved in that booking process. So can you kind of explain it?
A little. That's not my area of expertise, but I mean, so for instance, in Medina County, where I did prosecute, you get magistrated by the JPs. They don't have a criminal magistrate. And I don't know if that's true in like Atascosa County or Wilson County.
Yeah. So the magistrate is just a judge that you see after you've been arrested, and they explain your rights to you and they set bail. Now, in these smaller counties like Wilson and Kendall and Carnes, they don't have a full-time judge doing that. They have the local JPs that come in and they perform that function. But here in Bexar County, we have full-time magistrates.
24-hour magistration. But if you're in a smaller county, you may be waiting for a while before bond is set because you have to wait for the JP to come do your magistration.
Right.
They're not there 24 hours.
Right.
So you're going to sit there overnight until the JP comes in the morning to do your magistration, set bond.
But before you see the magistrate, you also have to do things like do that booking photo.
Yes.
And so I know, like in these small counties, that's always the big deal, right? Somebody's booking photo pops up on Facebook or booking.com. And that's always the thing that people are embarrassed about, is that booking photo.
Right.
Now, the funny thing is there have been scenarios here in the last few years where I think there was one guy that got famous from his booking photo just because he was really handsome.
Okay.
So, yeah. So if I got booked, that wouldn't be the case for me. But I do know that there are people who, in fact, there used to be this Instagram feed. I don't know if it's still there. It was called Mug Shodies. And the whole idea was it was booking photos of these attractive people. Yeah. And then, people would comment underneath like, oh, I can change her or whatever it is, or I'll pay her bail.
Right.
But the booking photo is usually pretty embarrassing for people.
But most booking photos are pretty innocuous. What you see generally, you don't see the average garden variety booking photo. Well, the things that are publicized are the weird booking photos.
Right.
However, when I was a prosecutor, obviously, if we go to trial as a prosecutor, the person's there in court dressed up looking nice in the suit and all.
Sure.
And generally we're going to present the booking photo to show this ain't the same person who was arrested
Right.
back on July 10th of 2024.
The guy sitting there in the suit with the nice haircut, that's not the same guy that was arrested and is there with the, messy hair.
Right.
And whatever it is, dried up vomit going down the side of his face.
Yes, exactly right.
And then during that booking process, they also take your fingerprints. Why do they do that?
So they take your fingerprints to make sure you really are who you say you are. We've had quite a few people give their brother's name and date of birth.
Okay.
And then you end up picking up another charge for failure to ID. So they want to make sure you really are who you say you are. And they also want to see what your criminal history is, because if you're booked for a regular DWI, but you've had a prior DWI that you've pled to, now you're going to be magistrated for a DWI second, which is a punishable up to a year in jail instead of 6 months in jail.
So when people are concerned about, hey, will I have a record? This booking photo, these fingerprints, this is part of the record that they're worried about, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And so one of the things, say we get a case dismissed and they get the case expunged, or say there's deferred adjudication and we do a petition for non-disclosure, other things that we'll have to spend more time talking about later on down the line. We can no longer guarantee anymore, like we could in the old days, that all that stuff will be wiped clean, because there's ways to find this stuff on social media, even though law enforcement wipes it from all their records.
Right. So if the judge orders records expunged,
yes.
that judge, that court order doesn't necessarily apply to mug shodies or
correct.
whatever
Exactly
private
right.
enterprise may have your photo, right?
Correct. Yes. But so look, most of the cases that we deal with, most of the clients, the mistakes you make on a criminal case are not unrecoverable. Don't make it worse. Get a good attorney who can help you out through the process, and you can recover from this stuff.
Okay. Well, we're up against a break here. So again, this is So You Got Arrested. This is your guide from cuffs to courtroom. My name is Steve Barrera, and I'm joined here by my co-host, Scott Simpson. We're here just to explain the process to you and kind of take some of the mystique out of the criminal justice system here in San Antonio and the surrounding areas.
Facing a criminal charge and unsure of what's next? We understand the immense pressure you're under. That's why over 5,000 clients have trusted BRCK Criminal Defense to navigate them through the criminal justice system. Our proven blend of experience and modern tactics will empower you to get your life back on track and emerge with a clear path forward. Don't fight this alone. Call us today. BRCK Criminal Defense, helping our clients move on with their lives.
They set bail, and they ask you if you want a court-appointed attorney or whether you are going to hire an attorney. You're not bound by that. So if you say, I want to hire an attorney, and then later on you end up not being able to afford one, you can get a court-appointed, or vice versa. If you say you wanted a court-appointed and then you realize this is too important, I want to hire a good attorney, then you can do that. But they still have to ask you that attorney question as part of the magistration. They're going to give you the range of punishment for what you're charged with, explain what the charges are, and then they're going to set the bond. And part of what they're doing is seeing if you're a flight risk, do you have a local address, okay, and what's your criminal history.
So does that make a difference if you're not local? Let's say you're arrested in Houston and you live down in the Valley. How might that affect?
So obviously it depends on the crime, right? I mean, if it's a DWI and you're in town, because we have a lot of tourists here.
Sure.
So we got people here in town who pick up DWIs, drive in rental cars, and you're still going to get a bond to make bond. They're not going to do a crazy bond on you just because you're from Houston or Dallas. Okay. But if you're not here legally, that's going to be a problem. They're going to set a higher bond because they're worried about you being deported and not being able to show up to court. If it's a violent crime, if we're talking about a shooting, if we're talking about any kind of robbery, they're going to look at are you here? You have ties to the community when they just factor in the bond. So everything's a factor. We try. The thing is, as we talk about cases, we try to talk about them in general, but every case is specific. Every case is different, and the good magistrates look at all it that way. The good prosecutors look at it all that way, and the good defense attorneys look at it all that way.
Right. Now, in the process of seeing that magistrate may play out a little bit differently here in San Antonio than it might in these smaller counties, like we talked about. Like I know for a fact in counties like Wilson County, Atascosa County, Karnes County, Kendall County, they don't have a magistrate setting bail overnight.
Right.
And so what that means is if your loved one gets arrested at 6 p.m. and there's no magistrate available until the morning, your loved one's not eligible to get out until the morning.
Correct.
So they're spending the night because of that, right?
Yeah. And so the other side of it in Bexar County, so you could go get magistrated at 2:00 in the morning, okay, and then hopefully a loved one is talking to a bond company for you, and they go and the bond company posts bond. We're looking at in Bexar County about 12 hours. From the time the bond is posted to the time you actually get processed out. That's just because of how many cases we have in Bexar County. So even if your loved one gets down there, like say you get arrested at 10:00 at night, the bond company makes the bond by 11. And you're thinking, oh, geez, I'll be out by 1:00. Not really.
Right.
Okay. You're going to be out like 12 hours after the bond is posted in general.
Well, and the thing that I like about Bexar County that's different from some of these other areas is they actually have a website, right?
Right.
You can check to see if your bail has been set on your loved one. They have the Bexar County Central Magistrate website. They don't have that in a lot of the smaller counties. You're just kind of waiting on that phone call from your loved one to say, hey, this is what bail's set at.
Now, I will say this, though. So then the website will say bond posted, and you may be thinking, okay, so he's coming out any minute. Just because it says bond posted doesn't mean he's going to be out in the next 10, 15 minutes. Sure. And I guess I shouldn't say he because women get arrested too.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Not as often, but
yeah.
So if somebody is arrested and they're in custody and their families are worried about them, what should the families be doing?
Well, the earlier you get the bond set, get the bond over there, the quicker the process can move. So we do have families who do cash bonds rather than use a bond company. Okay. So in Bexar County, the bond on the DWI may only be $2,000. So they come to the jail, to the tower there, right there off of Commerce Street, and they walk in there and they give the cash bond. So we just had a case where that case was dismissed later on, and our client was figuring out how to get the money back. And so I went to, it's actually in the basement of the old courthouse. I've been working at the courthouse since 1996. And they told me where it was. And I walked into the office and I said, I've been working in here for 25 years. I have never, and she goes, let me guess, you've never been in this office before.
Right. But
they were very helpful. So now I know I can tell you where to go when you're trying to get your bond money back if you do a cash bond.
And so a cash bond is just a situation where you have the option, if they set your bail at $2,000, of putting up the entire $2,000 for your loved one so they can get out. Right. And then at the conclusion of the case, if they made all their court appearances, you get that money back.
Correct. You get the money back. So that's the advantage of the cash bond, whereas the money you paid to the bondsman, you don't get back. That they put up the full, they guarantee the full amount in case you don't show up to court. Now, the interesting thing I learned was, so if the case is dismissed, you get the full amount back. But if you plead, they take up a little percentage of the money that you put up.
Right.
I didn't know that.
So while your loved one's in custody, it may be a good idea to start reaching out to some bail bond companies
right off the bat
to see what you can do to get your loved one out.
Yes.
And when that bail amount is set, let's say that the bail amount is extremely high. And it's so high that the bail bond company won't get your loved one out, or you just can't come up with the money to get the bail bond company to get your loved one out. Is there anything that can be done?
So here, I'm going to say the old days. Okay. 10 years ago, you and I used to be able to walk into a courtroom in Bexar County like the next day, assuming it happened on a weekday, and get the judge to reduce the bond. We can't do that anymore. Now we have to file the motion, and what we're looking at now. So if we file a motion to reduce your bond, I'm getting a hearing date in Bexar County of 2 weeks from then.
Okay. So an motion is just where we're asking the court to do something.
Right. And we have great success at getting the bond reduced, but we can't just get it done in a day or two. We have to file the motion, get a setting on the motion, and then appear in court. And the magistrate who does that here in Bexar County, Judge Nahara, is a great person. We used to be partners together at the DA's office. Very fair, judge. Wonderfully fair. And he will do the right thing on the bond. But we're going to take two weeks to get a hearing.
And I imagine during that time period, people get frustrated.
They get real frustrated, and they yell at us for, how come you haven't got our son out of jail yet?
Sure.
So it's important for them to know up front it's a process.
Yeah, because that's a tough scenario for the families. You have a loved one who's been arrested. At that point, they haven't been found guilty by anyone.
Correct.
They've just been accused of this crime. But now they're stuck in custody, and they're missing work. If they have kids, or kids are wondering, where's mama, where's daddy, and they're locked up, and they have no way of getting out.
Right. So that's why it's important. You got to hire an attorney who will explain all this to you, but you got to be willing to listen and not just yell at them. Okay. So I had a case where a guy, I think he does have a really good self-defense claim. He had two $50,000 bonds. We waited 2 weeks, but I got the judge to reduce the bond to 15 and 15. So that's $30,000 instead of $100,000. So the family had to pay the bonds company $3,000 instead of $10,000. So I saved them because you don't get the bond money back from and so I saved them $7,000 by them waiting for 2 weeks.
Right.
Okay. And I went to go see the client at the jail and explained to him the process. And then they sent me a picture of him home for Father's Day. Right. And so,
awesome.
We'll get it done. And $7,000 is not nothing.
Sure.
Your loved one should be willing to wait for those couple of weeks to say, if I can save you that kind of money.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
Now, what about, but I don't know, like how quickly you can get a bond setting like in the 81st or anything.
So in these smaller counties, the problem that you run into is, unlike Bexar County, they don't have a court available every day.
Oh.
So, in a county like Wilson or Kendall or Atascosa, they may have court once or twice a week. And so it's not as simple as just finding a day that works for us, it also has to work for the court. It has to work for the prosecutors. So it takes a little bit of time. The good thing is in some of these smaller counties, it's the same prosecutors that have been there for years. And so sometimes you have a working relationship to where you can reach out to them to see if maybe you can get some kind of an agreement done without having to wait the week or two to get into court. So, but every court's different.
And I'll say, for us, it's not sometimes we know all the judges and the prosecutors. Like in Medina County, because I prosecuted there for 2 years, I just call one of my friends there and say, "Hey, can you agree to the bond reduction?" And then if so, we just do a motion and we send it over to Judge Kindred, who's a wonderful guy, and he signs it nice and quickly.
Right.
So expertise matters and knowing people matters.
Sure, absolutely.
And I always tell the clients that, so a lot of these prosecutors are people that I trained when I was a prosecutor. Doesn't mean they're going to do me any inappropriate or special favors.
Sure. It
means they're going to listen to me when I call them up.
Right.
They're going to take my call.
Right. And that does make a difference.
Makes a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, the advice that I always give to people, because there's times where I get families who call and they say, well, Steve, do we get our loved one out? How soon do we get them out? My general advice is you want to get them out as soon as possible because cases take a long time to get resolved. So if you don't get them out, they could be in there for, a year or two while the case is going through the courts. Now, that being said, I always give this caveat. Look, your loved one better than I do. If your loved one is dealing with some kind of drug issue, or they're likely to go out and to commit another crime and make the entire situation that much worse, maybe leave them in a little bit, let them dry out, maybe let them have that come to Jesus moment before you get them out. Because if you get them out and they go and they immediately commit, an offense, then you've just made that entire situation worse.
I have many stories about, I used to always tell my kids that I'm not going to necessarily to get you out right away, but there's an actual case where a capital murder case where this younger kid, he's around 20, he worked up at the Rim, stole some from other employees at one of the shops there, picked up a misdemeanor theft charge, parents bond him right out. A month later, he steals a car. So now he's got a felony conviction while he's on bond for the misdemeanor theft, bond him right out. And then he breaks into a home and kills somebody. Now he's serving the rest of his life in prison. Right. And I would have said, after that second one, leave him for a little bit. Right. Okay, you bonded him out. He committed a new crime. He probably needs to sit.
Well, and a lot of that, and sometimes it gets frustrating for people because they want us to tell them, yes, 100%, either get your loved one out or don't get them out. A lot of it has to do with, look, these people. Right. Your loved one, what they're dealing with in their life, what they're going through. And so you should kind of act accordingly with that.
And let's not pretend that families can afford bonds sometimes. If somebody's got a very serious crime, they may have a $50,000 bond, and I may tell you that's as low as it's going to get. We can file a motion to reduce it, but that's an appropriate bond.
Sure.
And so that's as good as it's going to get, and they're not going to be able to afford it. Or we have clients who don't have family.
Sure, absolutely.
And so they're not going to make the bond, and they're going to sit until the case is resolved, one way or the other. Right.
Which unfortunately, sometimes here in the state of Texas can take quite a long time.
Correct. Yeah. And so, I always tell my clients, we can work out something at any stage in the process, but if we decide we want to go to trial, we're looking at about a year and a half after indictment, not after arrests. I guess we should talk about that at some point, but not today.
So but let's take a scenario where somebody does get out on bond. Mm-hmm. Now, at what point should the family be calling an attorney?
After they bonded out I would think they'd call an attorney while they're getting them bonded out, I would hope. But let's assume that they focus on doing the bond. The earlier you call the attorney, the better.
And why is that?
Because stuff happens, and then they want us to come in later and fix it. And there's stuff that mistakes have been made, and now it's too late. I can't put the genie back in the bottle.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
There's somebody bonded the person out, and they got GPS, and then they violated the conditions of GPS.
And so GPS is just the ankle monitor that kind of tracks where you're at, where you're going, restriction in a certain area.
And so they've gone and violated that condition, and now they're rearrested, and now they call us.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And now now everybody's already mad because they've already proven that they can't follow the conditions of bond.
Right.
And they want us to make it all all well.
Yeah. So I think the general advice would be, when the loved one's arrested, that first call should be to a bondsman. You want to find a bondsman. And then once your loved one is in the process of getting out, that might be the point where you might start looking for a lawyer to kind of help you out.
But I have I have clients repeat, not that the client is repeated, but they felt like a family friend has committed a crime and they've called me up before they called the bond company.
Okay.
And so there's different bond companies I've recommended, just because I know there's bond companies who are kind of the people who are looking to get off your bond right away and get you rearrested. And there's bond companies that are reputable and fair. Okay.
Well, and so the good thing is this is our first episode of So You Got Arrested. But in our second episode, we are going to get into some of these issues with bond.
Yes.
That's a very big thing for people. What happens when you're out on bond? What does that mean? What does that look like? And what are the restrictions that can be placed on you until you get to that very first court appearance? So we'll take that up in our second episode. We appreciate you joining us here for So You Got Arrested, your guide from cuffs to courtroom with Scott Simpson and Steve Barrera.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to So You Got Arrested. If you found this podcast helpful, share it with someone who needs to hear it. For more legal insights and real talk from the front lines of the Texas justice system, follow us and subscribe. And remember, BRCK Criminal Defense has your back. For more information, visit us at brckdefense.com.